Daniel and Jason had been best friends since childhood. They grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, and even shared the same dreams of success. But as they entered adulthood, their paths took very different turns. Daniel, grounded in his faith, worked diligently, trusting that God would open the right doors at the right time. His small business, though slow at first, eventually flourished. With every success, he remained humble, always giving credit to God. Jason, on the other hand, struggled. No matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to work out the way he wanted. He watched Daniel rise, feeling as though life was unfair. Jealousy crept into his heart like a shadow, whispering lies. Why him? Why not me? At first he hid his resentment well. He smiled, congratulated Daniel, and pretended to be happy for him. But inside, bitterness grew. Soon, his jealousy turned into something darker. He began to sabotage his friend in ways that even he didn't recognize at first. Daniel and Jason had been inseparable since childhood. Growing up in the same small town, they spent their days riding bikes through dusty streets, dreaming about the future. As kids, they would sit under the old oak tree near their neighborhood, talking about all the great things they would accomplish one day. "We're going to make it big," Jason would say, eyes filled with excitement. "Yeah," Daniel would nod. "But we have to work hard and trust God's plan." Back then, they believed nothing could ever come between them. They shared the same dreams, the same ambitions, and the same hunger for success. But as they grew older, their paths started to look different. Daniel had always been patient. While others rushed to find shortcuts to success, he focused on building steadily. He spent hours honing his skills, working tirelessly, and trusting that in due time, God would bless his efforts. He wasn't in a hurry. He believed that what was meant for him would come in God's perfect timing. Jason, however, struggled with patience. He worked hard too, but every failure made him feel like life was cheating him. He couldn't understand why things seemed to come easier for Daniel. Why did Daniel always land the right opportunities? Why did his efforts bear fruit while Jason seemed to wither? At first, Jason ignored the nagging thoughts. Daniel was his best friend. He should be happy for him. But the more he watched Daniel succeed, the harder it became to silence the voice in his head that whispered, "You're falling behind. You should be ahead. You deserve more." And so, comparison crept in like an unwelcome guest, slowly turning admiration into resentment. At first, Jason tried to ignore the feeling. He told himself it was just frustration, that he would get his own success soon. But the more he watched Daniel prosper, the harder it became to push down the envy creeping into his heart. Daniel's business had started small, just an idea, a few loyal customers, and a lot of faith. Jason had seen him struggle in the beginning, working late nights, praying through tough decisions, and trusting that God would make a way. And somehow things always seemed to fall into place for him. Jason, on the other hand, felt like he was always one step behind. No matter what he tried, new ventures, networking, different business ideas, nothing seemed to work out. Every failure felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that he wasn't measuring up. What made it worse was how effortlessly Daniel carried himself. He never bragged, never made Jason feel small. If anything, Daniel was always encouraging, always, reminding him, "Don't worry, man. God has a plan for you too." But those words didn't comfort Jason anymore. Instead, they stung. What if God's plan was for him to always be second? That thought festered, poisoning his heart. At first, it was subtle. Little moments of resentment, forcing fake smiles when Daniel shared good news. But soon, it grew into something darker. Jason found himself picking apart Daniel's success, downplaying his achievements. "He just got lucky," he told himself. "It's not like he's smarter than me." Then came the comparisons. Every time Daniel accomplished something, Jason measured it against his own failures. When Daniel bought a new car, Jason felt ashamed of his old one. When Daniel's business got featured in the local newspaper, Jason refused to read it. And then, almost without realizing it, Jason started to sabotage Daniel. Not in obvious ways at first, but in small, calculated actions. A negative comment here, a whispered doubt there. If someone praised Daniel, Jason would shrug and say, Yeah, but let's see how long it lasts. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just being honest. But deep down, he knew the truth. Envy had turned him into someone he no longer recognized, and soon it would drive him to do something he never imagined. Jason's resentment had turned into something dangerous. Something that no longer lived in just his thoughts. Now it had taken root in his actions. At first, it was just words. He would plant small seeds of doubt about Daniel whenever he could. If someone mentioned Daniel's success, Jason would scoff and say, "Yeah, but you know how these things go. Not every business lasts." Then, he started spreading subtle rumors. Nothing too obvious, just enough to make people question Daniel's integrity. "I heard he got some insider help," Jason would say casually. Must be nice to have connections. But even that wasn't enough. The bitterness inside him kept growing, pushing him further. He needed to do something. One evening, he saw an opportunity. Daniel had been working on a big deal, one that would take his business to the next level. A major client was considering signing with him. And if the deal went through, Daniel's success would be undeniable. Jason couldn't let that happen. He got his hands on the client's contact information and, under a fake name, sent an anonymous email warning them about Daniel. He hinted at financial instability, unethical business practices, nothing too extreme, just enough to make them hesitate. And it worked. The deal fell through. When Daniel found out, Jason played the part of the supportive friend. "Man, I'm so sorry. Some people just don't see your worth," he said, patting Daniel's back, hiding his satisfaction. "If I can't succeed, neither can he." But Jason had no idea that his actions were setting him up for his own downfall. Because, while he had been plotting against Daniel, he hadn't realized that God was watching, and soon, everything he had done in secret was about to come to light. Jason's sabotage had been working. At least, that's what he thought. Daniel had lost a major deal, missed key opportunities, and faced setbacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Jason convinced himself that leveling the playing field was necessary, but what he didn't see coming was his own downfall. One evening, Jason received a call from a potential investor, his biggest chance yet. He had pitched his business idea, and for once, things were looking up. The investor was interested, willing to fund his venture, and ready to sign. Jason felt a rush of excitement. Finally, it's my turn. But pride and greed led to recklessness. Eager to secure the deal, Jason exaggerated his success, twisting numbers, and making false promises. "If I perfect this deal, I will beat Daniel at this game," he thought excitedly. The investor, intrigued but cautious, decided to do some background checks. That's when everything unraveled. A mutual connection. A business owner Jason had lied to in the past, warned the investor that Jason was untrustworthy. Worse, rumors of Jason's anonymous email about Daniel had surfaced. Someone had traced the deception back to him, and word spread quickly. Overnight, Jason lost everything. The investor withdrew. Business opportunities vanished. His reputation, once shaky, was now ruined. And then came the worst blow of all. Daniel found out the truth. One evening, Jason received a message. "We need to talk." His heart pounded as he met Daniel at the same old oak tree where they once dreamed together. Daniel had chosen this location on purpose. This time, however, there was no laughter. Only silence and disappointment in Daniel's eyes. "I trusted you," Daniel said, his voice calm but heavy with pain. "You were like a brother to me." Jason had no words. He opened his mouth to explain, to justify. But nothing he could say would make it right. "You let jealousy destroy everything," Daniel continued, "but I won't let it destroy me." Then, with a deep breath, Daniel did something Jason never expected. "I forgive you," he said. Jason felt a lump in his throat. He had expected anger, hatred, or even revenge. But not grace. Not forgiveness. Yet instead of relief, shame crashed over him like a wave. He had spent so much time resenting Daniel's success that he had lost sight of who he had become. As Daniel walked away, Jason sank to his knees beneath the oak tree, staring up at the sky. He had nothing left. No business, no reputation, no best friend. And for the first time in years, He realized something. His real enemy had never been Daniel. It had been his own heart. Broken and alone, Jason whispered the only words he could manage. God, help me. Jason had lost everything. The investor had pulled out. His reputation was in shambles. And the worst part? The big contract he had signed, the one he had been so sure would secure his success, had fallen through, but not before he had taken out a huge loan to fund it. Now, the bank wanted its money back. At first, he tried to negotiate, tried to buy time, but it was no use. His accounts were empty. Creditors came knocking, and soon, Jason was forced to do the one thing he never imagined: sell everything he owned. His house, gone. His car, gone. Even the small valuables he had clung to, gone. One by one, the things he had worked for slipped through his fingers. He had always believed that money and success defined a person, that once he had wealth, he would finally be somebody. But now, standing in an empty apartment with nothing but a bag of clothes and overdue bills, he felt like a ghost of his former self. And worst of all, he was alone. The friends who had surrounded him when he was doing well had disappeared. People who once respected him now avoided him. And Daniel. Well, Jason couldn't blame him for walking away. For the first time in his life, there was no one left to impress, no one to compete with. Just him. And his brokenness. One night, sitting on a park bench with his head in his hands, Jason whispered, "God, where do I go from here?" For the first time, he prayed a sincere prayer to God, asking for help, and then the strangest thing happened. Jason sat on the edge of his bed, the only piece of furniture left in his tiny, empty apartment, staring at his phone. His fingers hovered over the call button. He had spent his entire life trying to prove that he didn't need anyone, that he could make it on his own. But now, with nothing left, he was ready to swallow his pride. His parents were his last resort. Moving back home felt like the final admission of failure, but he had no other choice. Just as he was about to make the call, his phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Meet me at my office tomorrow morning." Jason's heart pounded. He hesitated, staring at the words. He hadn't spoken to Daniel since their last conversation under the oak tree. Why would Daniel want to see him? The next morning, Jason stepped into Daniel's office, feeling out of place in his wrinkled shirt and worn-out shoes. He swallowed hard as he looked around. Everything in Daniel's life seemed to be thriving. The success, the stability, the respect. Everything Jason had wanted for himself. Daniel sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Daniel leaned forward and spoke. "I heard what happened," he said. "And I know you lost everything." Jason looked down, ashamed. Daniel took a deep breath before continuing. "I also know what you did to me, the sabotage, the rumors, the lies." His voice was calm but firm. "You hurt me, Jason." Jason clenched his jaw, guilt twisting inside him. "I know," he murmured. "And I don't expect you to forgive me again." Daniel exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "I already forgave you." Jason looked up, startled. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt," Daniel continued. "But God has been working on my heart too. And if he can show me grace, who am I to withhold it from you?" Jason felt a lump in his throat. Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "I don't owe you this, but I want to offer you a job." Jason blinked, stunned. "I need someone with vast experience for this position," Daniel said. "And I believe that person can be you, if you're willing to change." Jason's pride screamed at him to refuse, to walk away and rebuild on his own. But deep down he knew this was more than a job offer. This was redemption. Tears welled in his eyes as he nodded. "I don't deserve this," he admitted. "No, you don't," Daniel said with a small smile. "Neither do I. But that's what grace is." For the first time in months, Jason felt hope. He stood up and the two men shook hands. "Please be here first thing tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss, and I want you to meet the members of staff that you will be working with." "Thank you, Daniel. I now see why God has blessed you so much." Jason stood up to leave, but just as he was about to open the door, a beautiful lady stepped in. He recognized her immediately. It was Amanda, the woman he had pursued for years without success. She gave him a brief nod before walking into Daniel's arms. Daniel gave her a quick kiss and turned to Jason. "Meet Amanda, my fiancée." Jason felt the blood leave his face. What? Amanda was Daniel's fiancée. He remembered in a moment the many times he had tried to impress her without success. How did Daniel always manage to do this to him? Amanda of all women had to be Daniel's fiancée? This spelt a whole new dynamic. How was he going to work for Daniel with Amanda, the woman he loved in the background? This was a big blow to him, and he could feel the old monster called jealousy creep into his body. As he took the bus home, he could not shake the image of Amanda in Daniel's arms. The joy of getting a new job was gone. Find out what happens next in part 2 of this story. Subscribe to this channel to get part 2 and to get notified of all the amazing stories we continue to deliver to you.